Bank of Uganda State of the Economy report for last month offered a gloomy picture, with the country's forex reserves on a downward spiral since 2022, hitting an all-time low of $144.1 million, about 528 billion Uganda shillings, on account of high public service costs. While it's the first time since the reserves fell below $3.5 billion, or 12 trillion Uganda shillings, the drawback has been on account of mounting external debt financing costs resulting from an increase in accumulation of commercial debt. The Bank of Uganda report detailed that problems in the balance of payment, that is the difference between financial inflows and outflows for a particular period, resulted in drawdown in the reserve assets, which in the period to 3 months of import cover, dropping behind the central bank's target of 4 months. And with the economy increasingly anemic despite the rosy figures thrown around by policy wonks, the failure to shrink the bloated public administration, domestic revenue collection shortfalls, donors slamming the door on government since passing of the anti-gay law, and another election cycle around the corner, the writing is on the wall for tough times ahead. Accordingly, the government had hedged on the starting of commercial oil production in the fourth quarter of next year, which revenues from the sale of crude oil is for, among others, tripling debt servicing commitments and propel the economic growth to 7%, up from the current stagnation of 4 to 5%. According to the World Bank, Uganda could earn up to $3 billion, approximately 7 trillion Uganda shillings, in oil revenues as production picks up over the cycle. However, like countless other actors have chorused, the World Bank says this is only possible if revenues don't just end up in the country's leaders' personal bank accounts, but are channeled to development of human capital, and if an effective sharing formula is ensured for revenues to trickle down to local government entities. Since April 2021, when the government and the joint venture partners, the French TotalEnergies EP and China's Cnooc, signed off key agreements for the proposed East African crude oil pipeline, announced final investment decision end of 2025 was the working date for delivering first oil. The 2025 timeline, according to inside accounts, was to coincide with the upcoming election cycle, which is already gathering steam. However, knowledgeable sources told NTV this schedule has been revised to end of 2026, but could as well stretch into early 2027. Inexplicably, since the announcement of the commercial viability of Uganda's oil reserves 18 years ago, the commercial production date has shifted numerous times, from 2008 to 2015 to 2018 to 2020 to 2025 to now end of 2026. The difference this time around is that most of the required supporting infrastructure, legal framework and supporting institutions are in place, coupled with the final investment decision in 2022. Officials, on the other hand, maintained that the 2025 date still stands.
Overall, there is a timeline in terms of key milestones that you seek to achieve. It is true you might find 1 or 2 contractors out of over 2,000 contractors has delayed or has had an issue here and there, operational, technical, logistical, but we have a Gantt chart that is the overall project timeline, the major pillars. One of the major pillars for this financial year was the full acquisition of land, full footprint for the land that is required in Kingfisher, in Tilenga, and for hiccups.
According to inside accounts, the revision of the date from 2025 is primarily on account of the behind-the-schedule closure of the $5 billion or 18 trillion shillings financing of the oil pipeline, or ECOP. The ECOP project financing was eagerly anticipated by the end of September, but now it is expected to the end of this month. The more it drags, the more it complicates the first oil production schedule, notwithstanding some work on the ground. For instance, last month closed on a high note, with delivery of the first batch of insulated line pipes to the project camp yard in the Chotera district at the Tanzania border. The delivery of batches of line pipes hauled by 9 trucks from the coating plant in Zaga district in Tanzania was the proverbial slap in the face of a network of local and international NGOs that have decampaigned the project since 2020. Ali Sekatawa, the Director of Legal and Corporate Affairs at the Oil Sector Regulator, offered some assurances.
From a project execution point of view, the hard work is the one which has been finished. The simpler work is the one which is remaining. Because the simple logic is that if you're to lay a pipe, you've done all the engineering, you've done all the planning, you've done the drenching, and the pipe has been insulated. I mean, if you're just to bring a pipe and lay it, I think the simpler work is the one towards the end. However, this is the first mega project of this nature in this country. It has a project timeline based on milestones. I think realistically, if you reach at 2025, you can also realistically say what has been completed. From where we stand, what we set to do as at October 2024 has been done.
He said the war drums sounding in the Middle East since last October have posed some logistical nightmares.
Across the Red Sea, as you know, most of our materials come through that route from Europe, from China, from the Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. So the wars that have happened there, again, have in a way or another affected the timelines for delivery because the logistic companies try to look for alternative routes. It's a situation we are watching, but when you're doing contracts of this nature, you put provisions that can cater for this, because there are two situations. There are alternative routes, but those alternative routes might be more expensive and longer.
Uganda's section of the oil pipeline runs 296 kilometers through 172 villages in 25 sub-counties in 10 districts in Uganda and 1,147 kilometers through 25 districts on the Tanzania side. At least 780 kilometers of line pipes have been delivered so far, from the manufacturing plants in Greece and China to the coating plant in Tanzania. The contractor, China Petroleum Pipeline Engineering, which is in charge of construction, is on ground on both sides of the border, coordinating early civil works and expected to ramp up activity later next year. Amid the flurry of engineering, procurement and construction activities coordinated by Australia's Worley, the behind-the-schedule closure of project financing has kept the mood far from festive. Oil company executives and senior government officials remain tight-lipped on the matter, citing the tenacious Stop hiccups campaign that in recent months has seen police and protesters engage in running battles outside the Chinese embassy in Kololo ever since it was revealed that China banks are in the front seat to finance the project.
The guarantees we have from hiccup and its shareholders, we can confidently tell the people of Uganda that the project will proceed to its completion based on all the financial and commercial and corporate guarantees that we have. How the implementers organize their finances is a matter that they can comment about.
Officials describe Uganda's oil project comprising of the Kingfisher Field Development Area operated by Cnooc that straddles Chikube and Hoima districts, the Tilenga project operated by TotalEnergies EP that straddles Bulisa and Nwea districts, and ECOP as integrated. In effect, all pieces across the three puzzles have to move concomitantly to achieve first oil, whether in 2025 as some officials still maintain, or in 2026-2027.
We expect that if we continue at the same pace and we do not have any externalities and so on, then we should be able to meet that timeline, plus or minus. Because even when you're constructing your own house, small as it is, it's possible that you might reach the day for entering the house and you need to clarify on a switch, a sewer system and so on. But from the overall target, we think that whatever we are supposed to achieve by now has been achieved and it is on course. What happens after now, we cannot predict, but we are hopeful that we can be able to meet, or if there's an adjustment, that can be addressed because you will be seeing that this has been done.
The announcement of the final investment decision on February 2, 2022 unlocked $10 billion or 36 trillion shillings onto the next development and construction with a flurry of key contracts awarded. By the look of things, Cnooc appears to be making significant progress on the Kingfisher Field development area that holds an estimated 560 million barrels of oil and will produce 40,000 barrels of oil per day. The Chinese company has so far installed 4 well pads and drilled 9 out of 11 oil wells needed to be readied for first oil. 31 oil fields are spread across the Kingfisher project to be drilled using 1 oil rig. The other 2 oil rigs are employed on TotalEnergies EP's Chilenga project in Noya and Bulisa. By this account, industry sources intimated it would be feasible to start oil production next year if either the pipeline or the proposed 60,000 barrels per day refinery is in place by then. The government is currently in negotiations with Dubai-based Alpha MBM Investments LLC on design, finance and construction of a $4 billion or 14.6 trillion shillings refinery complex in Buseruka sub-county in Hoima district. On the other side, on TotalEnergies Chilenga project, first oil has to come into play after at least 150 oil wells have been readied. The Chilenga project encompasses 426 oil wells, out of which only 78 have been drilled to date. The project itself is reeling from numerous delays and crises relating to delayed payment of subcontractors by the main contractor, McDermott.
The issue of payment of contractors is a valid issue, which we have taken serious investigation and concern about. But from a project perspective, it's probably affecting less than 5 to 8% of the contractors, and we have taken measures to make sure that that issue is addressed. From a major outlook of execution of what you call superstructures, this is not something that is very unusual, because remember, you're dealing with between 2,000 to 3,000 contractors.
TotalEnergies EP, according to the oil sector regulator, is currently fast-tracking installing the 7 well pads, both the north and south of the River Nile, out of the planned 31 well pads, of which the 426 oil wells will be looped and drilled using the 2 rigs. The Chilenga project is expected to produce up to 200,000 barrels per day from the 426 oil wells. Against the backdrop of this momentum, Sekatawa said the oil project is on track to be delivered within schedule.
We consider next year as our last bend, because it's 2025. So we expect to be doing the final activities for bringing on course the oil and bringing it live.
In the same vein, the government plans to close out the discussions on the liquefied petroleum gas LPG generation. In August, Patrick Poyan, the Chief Executive Officer of TotalEnergies SE, the parent company of TotalEnergies EP, told the high-level ONS conference in Norway that his company planned to invest $400 million or 1.4 trillion Uganda shillings to develop the liquefied petroleum gas from the estimated 600 billion standard cubic feet of gas associated with Uganda's 6.5 billion barrels of oil reserves.
The energy world is changing, and we must adapt to build a responsible future, taking fully into account this climate change phenomenon, which or the young generation are asking us to fight against and to take actions.
The liquefied petroleum gas project is part of the French oil giant's plans to capture the imagination of energy transition enthusiasts. In 2020, the company changed name from Total to TotalEnergies, and in July this year announced acquiring a stake in the Bujagali hydropower plant, one of the clean forms of energy. Liquefied petroleum gas has been classified by the World Health Organization as the clean energy option, one of the many required to cut emissions from biomass and other polluting fuels.
The bigger gas is the one in Tanzania, but the one we have can only be used for our local needs. And for us, we think that that would be a game changer, because even if we reduced 60% reliance on charcoal and firewood in the country, then that's a very big, significant step. But for you to do that, you need very serious policy intervention over time. There are issues of affordability, reliability, and so on. And those are being addressed separately as the project comes on board.
While the revision of the first oil schedule will land as unwelcome news for both the sector and the economy, since 2022, the country has been witnessing an increase in foreign direct investment on account of the oil project. Contracts in the region of $5 billion or 18.2 trillion shillings have been awarded on the Tilenga, Kingfisher and ECOP out of the $7.2 billion or 26 trillion shillings approved as of this month. Of these, contracts worth $2 billion or 7 trillion Uganda shillings, representing 41% of the total contracts awarded, have been allocated to Ugandan companies. Some 14,451 people, of whom 13,048 are Ugandans, or 90%, have been employed to date. However, the million-dollar question is whether Uganda is nearing the finish line to starting commercial production.